2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 SE Performance First Drive, your own drive to survive. F1 tech for the street is impressive and rewarding, but it's not necessarily joyful. From its founding, AMG's formula has been simple: put a big, powerful engine in a performance suspension setup in a Mercedes luxury vehicle. The world is changing rapidly, though, and AMG must adapt to survive. The solution: the Formula One-inspired 2023 Mercedes-AMG C63 SE Performance. The why? Commit all that official naming nonsense to memory if you like. We'll all likely end up calling it the C63 like we always have. The ridiculous name could be even longer, because this car is also all-wheel drive, 4MATIC Plus in Mercedes speak, and a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, PHEV. It is, as an AMG executive explained to us, starting the transition to electrified and fully electric sports cars. This is how the renowned in-house tuner will continue to work its magic in an age where we give more than lip service to vehicle emissions. Notice we didn't say anything about range or fuel economy. The AMG people are very clear on this. The complicated hybrid powertrain is about performance. Yes, you can plug it in and drive up to 8 miles on pure electric power at speeds up to 81 miles per hour. By today's standards, that range is pathetic for a PHEV, but that's not the point. AMG isn't even talking about fuel economy yet, but it would be difficult for a hybrid to do worse than a twin-turbo V8, even though that, too, isn't the point. The point is to make the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 SE Performance the fastest, most powerful C63 ever, and to convince the market that high-performance hybrids are the near to medium-term future before full EVs are ready to take the reins. It's inspired by Mercedes-AMG's recent dominating success in F1 and informed by the company's somewhat foolhardy attempt to put an actual F1 engine in a road-legal car known as the AMG 1. By the numbers, it's a compelling argument. All of its gasoline and electric power plants combined, the C63 makes 671 horsepower and 752 lb-ft of torque. For those of you who are comparison shopping, that's 168 HP and 236 lb-ft more than the 4.0-liter twin-turbo V8 this new powertrain replaces. The how. How the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 reaches those numbers is far more interesting. Up front is Clutch Your Pearls, the world's most powerful production four-cylinder, a 2.0-liter turbocharged unit that makes 469 HP and 402 lb-ft with the help of two small electric motors, one embedded in the turbocharger and the other reducing engine load in a belt alternator starter arrangement. The one in the turbo nestles between the turbine and the compressor and runs off the powertrain's 400-volt electrical architecture. It spools up the turbo immediately at low engine speeds and keeps it spooled when you lift off the throttle momentarily, thereby eliminating turbo lag. Not just in theory, either. In practice, the gasoline engine feels like it's always in the meat of its power band because no matter how you drive it, you're never waiting on turbo boost to build. It's always there in full force. All of this would be massively impressive on its own, but there's another, much bigger electric motor on the rear axle doing even more work to make you go fast. Able to apply up to 201 HP directly to the rear axle, and even forward through the clutched center differential to the front axle, it and its battery are the keys to making this whole contraption work. Mounting it on the rear axle shifted the weight balance from 54/46 front/rear on the old car to 50/50 on the new one, and putting it behind the 9-speed multi-clutch automatic transmission instead of between the gearbox and the gas engine allowed AMG to use all of the electric motor's power rather than restricting it to protect the transmission. It's not just a motor geared to the axle, either. It acts through a 2-speed automatic that shifts into high gear at up to 87 miles per hour. Also wedged in there is an electronically controlled limited slip differential. Separating the electric motor from the gas engine and giving it its own little transmission also allowed engineers to get the maximum output from the blended powertrain, since the two power plants peak at different engine/motor speeds. None of this arrangement makes the powertrain sound like a twin-turbo V8 or like an EV. As you might expect, it sounds like a turbocharged four-cylinder, though in this case one that's been tuned to make lots of bass notes. It's a perfectly acceptable sound for a four-banger, but nothing to write home about. As it'll happily putter around under pure electric power in some modes, it also makes an artificial noise at low speeds to warn pedestrians of the car's presence. It sounds like a computer's interpretation of the four-cylinder idling, and, thanks to a microphone in the exhaust, it is actually based on real noises, just digitally enhanced ones. Same thing in the car, if you turn on the artificial exhaust sound booster. We preferred to go without. The payoff. The result of all the wizardry happening under the car is high-performance EV acceleration that never lets up. Noise and vibration from the combustion engine be damned, the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 SE Performance pulls like a Tesla whenever you stand on the skinny pedal. Unlike a Tesla, though, it doesn't start to slack off at high speeds. The 11 total gears split between two transmissions allow the car to pull just as hard at speeds well past 100 miles per hour as it does from a stop. It pulls so hard and so relentlessly, you quickly find yourself in the supercar conundrum. Modern supercars are so quick you'll often find yourself hurtling toward a corner much faster than you've ever done so before, requiring quicker reactions and way harder braking to get yourself slowed down in time to make that corner. Not only using but maintaining full throttle in this car isn't materially different from doing the same in a McLaren 765 LT, street or track. Full throttle doesn't happen often, and when it does, it feels like you're hanging on for dear life by the time you lift. Most of the time, the corners are just too close together to necessitate or even allow for full throttle. Part throttle is way more than enough to get you there at blinding speed. Just to reiterate, this is ostensibly a high-performance luxury sedan we're talking about. It accelerates that hard. F1 driver in training. The new Mercedes-AMG C63 pulls even harder if you remember to push through the kick-down switch. Depending on your drive mode, you only get between 25 and 80% of the electric motor's output by pushing the gas pedal down to the switch. Push through the switch, however, and you get the full 201 HP from the rear axle for up to 10 seconds. Things get really wild at this point, especially if you do it exiting a tight corner. From a stop, AMG says the C63 will hit 60 miles per hour in 3.3 seconds and pull all the way to an electronically limited 174 mph top speed. How and when you deploy electric boost is a whole story in and of itself. AMG recommends you go to a pre-mapped racetrack and engage the Boost Strategy app. Depending on whether you want to set a qualifying lap time or settle into an extended lapping session, the instrument cluster will tell you when during the lap to use the kickdown switch and for how long. In qualifying, you'll be told to use it more often and to keep your foot in it longer to use as much electric boost as possible for the best lap time. Under extended lapping, you'll use it less often and in shorter bursts to give you consistent, repeatable fast laps by not draining the battery. To do it correctly, you need to watch the instrument cluster to know when to push the kickdown switch and when to let off. Since it'll basically never tell you to keep it floored all the way to the end of the straight, the electric motor becomes less and less helpful at higher speeds, so you're just wasting energy. You must monitor it constantly while also going full throttle in a 670 HP car. It's based on the way electric boost is used strategically in F1 race cars and will give you an entirely new respect for the mental load F1 drivers carry. Going fast was already hard work, and it only gets harder when you have so much to think about while you're doing it. Make it stop. Thankfully, the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 brakes hard, too. Standard two-piece iron rotors with aluminum hats are clamped by 6-piston front and single-piston rear calipers. Wait, only one piston in each rear caliper? You must have forgotten about the electric motor on the rear axle. It can supply up to 120 kilowatts of regenerative braking pulled off of either the rear axle or both axles with the all-wheel drive system engaged. It has 4 levels, labeled 0 through 3, though most of the time you are going to be in level 1 unless you command otherwise. 0 is no regen at all, 1 feels like lifting off the throttle in a gas-powered car, 2 is high regen, and 3 is one-pedal driving. The AMG-designed battery recharges so quickly, you're often locked out of level 3 and occasionally level 2 as well because there's nowhere for the energy to go. Regardless, the brakes feel well matched to the vehicle, but with output like this on tap and 4,654 pounds to wrangle, we'd prefer even more stopping power. Hopefully the optional carbon ceramic brakes AMG will introduce sometime later will add braking force as well as fade resistance. Wait a minute. Yes, you read that curb weight correctly. The new C63 weighs nearly 700 pounds more than the old one. 196 pounds of that alone is the 6.1 kilowatt-hour battery, which sits on top of the rear axle and creates a 3-inch step in the trunk floor, but helps create the 50/50ths weight balance. Unlike other battery packs, it features direct coolant contact with the battery cells to regulate their temperature as precisely as possible. This is what allows it to discharge and recharge so quickly when you're hammering on the car. Other battery designs would overheat by the end of lap 1. The other significant weight penalty comes from the all-wheel drive system, another C63 first. Though the car is primarily rear drive, it can send up to 50% of gas engine, electric motor, or combined power to the front axle. Not just good for slippery roads, sending power forward aids traction during high-speed driving. In an ideal situation, you can push the throttle pedal all the way to the floor when exiting a corner, and the power going to the front wheels will help the car bite and pull itself out of the turn rather than into an under or oversteer moment. It does work this way but only if the corner is flat or on camber. If it's even slightly off camber or a teensy bit slippery, giving too much throttle too quickly will in fact induce mild to moderate understeer, though you can eliminate it simply by backing off slightly. This is one of the more obvious symptoms of the car's considerable weight. The other you feel earlier as you enter a corner. Most of the time, the C63 just feels solid like a Mercedes ought to. When you first turn the wheel to take a corner, though, that's when you really sense the weight. More accurately, you feel the inertia the weight creates. There's this unmistakable sense that the car doesn't want to change direction, it wants to keep going straight, and the front and rear steering systems do everything they can to pull it in another direction. Once the weight shifts and the car settles on its suspension, everything is fine, and the cornering grip, particularly on the standard Michelin Pilot Sport 4's tires, is phenomenal. It's during the transition that the car pushes back. There's always this impression the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 would really like to get back to going straight, and it saps some of the joy from driving it. Yes, it'll do the corners, but it doesn't dive eagerly into them, it has to be cajoled. We hope the coming optional Michelin Pilot Cup 2R tires will help at least with the understeer, if not the reluctance to change direction. Steer around it. The steering itself is at least nicely weighted and fairly communicative. Because power is applied to the front wheels only on an as-needed basis, it rarely interferes significantly with the road feel. The rear steer system, meanwhile, is imperceptible in operation, though we suspect that may have something to do with the car's eagerness to rotate under trail braking. Dial back the stability control and the rear end becomes more eager to swing around and point you into the corner if you mix braking and steering. It always feels like just the right amount of rotation, if not a little too much, but it can be a bit disconcerting at the speeds this car carries into a corner. Thankfully, oversteer is managed easily, as the C63 comes around predictably. The breakaway is linear rather than abrupt. The 0.4-inch longer wheelbase than a standard C-Class no doubt helps keep it from spinning like a top, as does the 3.0-inch wider track width, which is slightly wider at the front than the rear. The rest of the time, though, the car just sticks. With this much power, you expect a need to manage the throttle carefully to keep everything in line, but the sophisticated suspension maximizes traction at all times. If you'd prefer it didn't, there's a drift mode. The rest of the time, though, the tires dig in and you just go. Avoid the induced on-throttle understeer and you'll be shocked by the cornering speeds this AMG can carry, too. Major credit goes to the active adaptive dampers borrowed from the AMG GT-R Black Series, which are sport sedan firm but comfortable in their comfort mode. However, they are too stiff for the street in every other mode and clearly designed for glass-smooth racetracks. Technically impressive, emotionally distant. The idea of this car is for you to watch the latest season of the F1 reality drama Drive to Survive on Netflix, then jump in your 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 and head to the racetrack and try to drive like Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Plan your boost strategy, manage your battery level, manage your tires, manage your brakes, all those things necessary to compete at the highest level of modern Grand Prix racing. It's all extremely interesting and mentally stimulating, but in an academic sense. There's so much to think about, you start to forget to just have fun, and when you ignore all the technical stuff and just drive, the weight of the car and its inertia remind you that sheer driving pleasure is not what the 2024 Mercedes-AMG C63 SE performance is about. It's about being the fastest, not necessarily the most fun, and those two things don't always go hand in hand.